Dave Lochran, Adam Shaw, a 4-game slate. Not the most beautiful one. It is election day. Everyone got out there and put their vote in. Adam, did you vote today?
I'm going after lock. I put it off to the last minute. I don't think anybody will be too surprised by that.
No, don't the polls close at 7?
No, they close at 8.
At 8, that's right. Open at 7. Close. Are you voting for Scott Quinn?
That was like it felt like a troll paper I wrote in like high school if I had to fill out. If I had the answer like a questionnaire, like hypothetically, if I was running for Senate or whatever.
You saw the video I sent you too? He's just sitting there with that face.
Yeah, he's like the stereotypical person. It told me where he was from in Maryland, and he's like the stereotypical person from that area.
That's the thing.
It reminded me of the resume from Step Brothers.
Yeah. Too good. All right, let's keep it going. Get it started here. Sweet, already 2 thumbs down. Thanks, boys.
They don't know who the hell Scott Quinn is.
Yeah, I guess not. I don't know. I guess early information isn't up to par. Hit us with a like if you appreciate this content. We appreciate you guys as well. Charlotte and Atlanta. Taurean Prince ruled out. That was the marquee news of the day, Adam. Not a whole lot else. Just in terms of other injuries, we'll get to it. Doncic is in. Warren's probable. Carroll doubtful. Not that anyone cares. Harkless, those guys, really not all that important. But this game is the only game that has a line that's heavier than 2 points. But it also has the highest total on the slate at 232. Charlotte also has the highest expected total. Should not come as a surprise. But Taurean Prince out for Atlanta. Why don't we'll talk about the Atlanta rotation. It's going to take a while. So let's start with the Charlotte side. What are you doing with Kemba Walker?
I am playing Kemba Walker because I love the spot for him. Obviously, he's let us down a few games in a row, once in a good matchup against Cleveland, a couple of difficult matchups mixed in there as well. But this is the most favorable out of any of those. You have Atlanta, who leads the team in pace, or leads the league in pace this year. Also, as of whenever NBA.com took down their play type data, Atlanta was one of the worst teams at defending the pick and roll. Kemba leads
the league. Does that
not
piss you off, by the way?
It's really annoying. Yeah.
It's still there, by the way. It's still there. I had a viewer DM'd me, and I appreciate that. He DM'd me. Shout out to I don't even know where it is, but point is, it was Brent. Brent, I won't say his last name in case he didn't want it, but he said that it's still there. You just have to basically use direct URLs, so there's no category links right now, which I did, but it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Would you like it if you want to? It's easy for transition or something, but then pick and roll. I don't know what the direct URL is for that.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, like Kemba leads the league in pick and roll possessions. He's also extremely efficient there. So again, I think it's a really, really, really good spot for him. The only concern would be that Atlanta's playing shorthanded on the road in Charlotte. They're not good as it is. But you have to think that if Charlotte blows this game open, it's probably because Kemba is having a big game. I think the easiest way, especially, in tournaments, the easiest way to kind of mitigate the blowout risk is just to set rules where if Kemba's in your lineup, you have, at least one of Trae Young or Kent Bazemore or, a couple of the, cheap guys from Atlanta, just to kind of balance it out. And hopefully you get, kind of a high scoring competitive game and you get a lot of upside that way. So I'm planning on Kemba being my highest owned point guard just because the matchup's too good.
Yeah, it's a really good spot. A really, really good spot. Outside of Kemba, though, it's hard for me to justify, a Nick Batum, who's been fine lately, but, unless he's giving you that 10-10-10 game with the triple-double bonus, you're looking at that low 30 range, right, for a decent game. And then, at center, what you're dealing with. You got Cody Zeller, who is another low-ceiling player. Is it possible he has a decent game here? Is it possible that if it stays close and he plays 26 minutes, it's possible? You're just rolling the dice. And then you've got Hernan Gomez as well, who in close games has seen like between 14 and 18 minutes. I want to talk about, though, the other players, whether it be, well, let's first talk about Marvin Williams, just from a FanDuel standpoint. Really bad power forward position. Where do you stand on a guy like Marvin Williams?
Yeah, I'm ending up with a bunch of him on FanDuel just because basically the wing and four rotation for Charlotte has been a mess. Like there's just so many guys that eat into each other's minutes. You can't really confidently predict it, but he's 3,900 and you can drop the score if he does only play like 16 minutes. He certainly still has upside there if he were to run into 23 or 24 minutes to just, smash that price tag here. So the fact that you can drop the score, you have to roster two power forwards and the position is absolutely awful. I'm going to end up with a bunch of Marvin Williams on FanDuel.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a really bad position. Outside of Marvin Williams, you have guys like Jeremy Lamb, Monk, you've got Bridges. Do any of these players stand out to you today? Let's go with two different scenarios. If it stays competitive or if it blows out, because again, this game does have an 11.5-point spread. If Atlanta's not knocking down 40+% of their 3-pointers, they're done. And we know that for a fact. And one of their best 3-point shooters, Taurean Prince, has already been ruled out. So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I like Jeremy Lamb. It's a good spot for him. The price tag is fair, I think. I'm not prioritizing him over Kemba, but if you have lineups where you're going to other point guards, because point guard, I think, is the deepest position on the slate, if you're going to other guys, then Jeremy Lamb's a really nice way to still give yourself upside from Charlotte because he is capable of scoring in bunches. Hasn't done it very consistently this year, but the talent's there. And if Charlotte scores a bunch of points and it doesn't come from Kemba, there's a pretty good chance that a lot of it's coming from Jeremy Lamb. So I like him in tournaments, but I would easily prioritize Kemba over him.
Yeah, I would too. But none of them are priority plays outside of Kemba for me. They're guys that I'll mix in, but none of them actual priorities. Anyone other than Kemba on the Charlotte team, someone that you're like, I got to get that in there?
No.
Me neither. How about the Atlanta side? We're talking about no Taurean Prince. That does make a big difference. He's got the wingspan. He's not a bad perimeter defender. He should be better, but he's not bad. This guy in close games where he's not in foul trouble. They haven't had many close games, but where he's not in foul trouble, he's playing 30+ minutes. So that's a decent void here. You're looking at guys like Kevin Huerter and Bembry, DeAndre Bembry. Let's start with this situation first and break down where you think it's going, and then I'll talk about mine as well.
Yeah, so I think that it's clear to me how you would expect this to go. I'm not super confident that it actually happens just because Atlanta does have so many bodies that they can use to fill in these minutes. But if you look at previous games, DeAndre Bembry has basically been the direct substitute for Taurean Prince. So whether Bembry joins the starting lineup or not, I expect that he sees the biggest boost here. I have him projected for around 30 minutes. And then Kevin Huerter, I expect to see the second biggest boost because he basically has been subbing in for Kent Bazemore, but he also at times takes Taurean Prince's minutes. For example, in the last Atlanta game, Prince played like 30 seconds of the third quarter. It was Kevin Huerter who subbed in for him, and then Bembry ended up subbing in for Bazemore when Bazemore's first stint was up. So I think Kevin Huerter ends up playing around 25, 26 minutes here. Beyond that, you get kind of trickle down effects to other guys, but nothing that you can be super confident in. Like Amari Spellman, I think there's a path for a few more minutes for him. He started last game, played 20 minutes. And the fact that you're going to have Bembry and Huerter soaking up these other minutes, I think opens up a few minutes for him. Same for Alex Poitras, same for Vince Carter potentially. But I think that Bembry and Huerter are the two guys that you're going to want to prioritize the most out of the, kind of backup fringe rotation guys.
Me too. And the way I see it is that Bembry is probably – so the weird thing about Bembry is this team has been involved in so many blowouts at him that it makes the analysis a little bit more difficult. But in some close games, he's played like upwards of 30 minutes. And then in all the blowouts, he plays like low to mid 20s. So I think it's reasonable that DeAndre Bembry plays, say, 30, 32 minutes if this game stays close. That's the problem.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Do you think Kevin Huerter starts?
I think
I think he does.
Either Kevin Huerter or Vince Carter starts. Like, it wouldn't surprise me.
That's a good call. Might be Vince. Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me at all if they just throw him into the starting lineup so that they can keep Bembry and Herter with the second unit.
Yeah, that's a good call. And the concerning part is Carter's played upwards of 26 minutes this season, like in a game.
Yeah, and like I don't expect that to happen. The point is just they have so many bodies. You have Tyler Dorsey healthy too. Like they have so many bodies that they potentially. It scares me because obviously these guys are going to be really popular, and I think that they should be. I don't have any reason to say that they shouldn't, but it just scares me that they could just run a really weird rotation in a lot of different ways, and it could make it a really frustrating night.
Yeah, I think so too. Bembry and Herter are the guys that I'm with here. I know I'd been having some issues with Wowie just in terms of spitting out the right numbers. So I'll check them with you as well. I talked about it earlier today. Trae Young has played 84 minutes with Taurean Prince off the court this year. He has a 44% usage rate, a 57% assist rate, and 1.72 fantasy points per minute.
Yeah, I didn't run it without Taurean Prince. I ran it alongside Kent Bazemore without Taurean Prince. And going back to preseason, he'd played about 68 minutes, had a 28.9% usage rate, and a 36.5% assist percentage.
Yeah, it's
I just didn't want too many Trae Young with like a bunch of backups minutes mixed in.
Sure. Yeah, no. I mean, it worked for me, but even so, those are pretty solid numbers that don't concern me much. The 44 seems high, to say the least. But I think you're going to get a lot of opportunity with Trae Young here. You know, if this were a bigger slate, Adam, this wouldn't be someone that I liked as much. But I do like Trae Young here. Now, once again, this is a guy that you're going to get probably the blowout's the biggest concern. If it's close, he's playing 33 minutes or so, maybe 32 or so, but close, above 30 for sure. I'm willing to take that risk tonight. I do like Trae Young here, even though I don't love the matchup.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's also, I had mentioned setting a rule for Kemba Walker to try and maximize his ceiling by including Atlanta guys. I'm doing the reverse with Trae Young as well. In lineups where I have Trae Young, I want to have at least one of the scorers from Charlotte, whether it's Kemba, Jeremy Lamb, or even Nick Batum, because if Young does go out and have a ceiling game, chances are really good that this game stayed close. And we know Charlotte's going to get their points. It would be really, really surprising if this game stays close. It would be surprising if it's because Charlotte doesn't score. It's most likely going to be because Atlanta just keeps up with them. And so if Trae Young goes out there and has a monster game, there's a really good chance that someone on the Charlotte side is getting the opportunity to be really productive as well.
Exactly. So Trae Young to me is someone that just based on the slate, I have a lot of interest in. Aside from that, how much exposure to Bazemore do you have on, let's say, DraftKings and then FanDuel?
Haven't run DraftKings yet. I've been playing around with my FanDuel lineups for the last, half hour or so. Right now, Bazemore is hitting my ownership caps. Right now I have him at 30%. Okay. I'm waiting on, final ownership projections to figure out exactly where I end up at. But point being, on FanDuel, I'll end up with a good amount of Bazemore, I think.
All right. Yeah. And with Jeremy Lin, by the way, the only way he's playing over 20 minutes is if it's just a massive blowout. Otherwise, he's playing 10 minutes per game or 12
I wouldn't say the
game.
only way. He's another guy that I think could completely screw up this rotation if they actually played him alongside Young. They haven't.
See, I don't. The reason I see it differently is because outside of Vince Carter, they're obviously trying to get a lot of these young guys as much work as possible. Vince Carter really seems like the only one that has eaten into like significant minutes at in the rotation. So I personally would be surprised if Lin's out there playing off the ball at the 2 with Bazemore at the 3. To me, it doesn't seem necessary. But I could be wrong. I could definitely be wrong.
I'm not saying that I think it's a likely outcome. It's just that we've seen Lin play, a handful of minutes alongside Young at times. It's just he's another body that it wouldn't be shocking, I don't think, if he gets more minutes than we're expecting, and it just ruins everything.
It's kind of like yesterday, Ntilikina played 16 minutes and then threw the entire rotation and out of whack.
Yeah, exactly.
So anything.
It's just really I get really nervous playing like in tournaments. I get really nervous playing popular fringe guys from bad teams that have a lot of bodies because there's just so much that just unpredictable stuff that happens because they suck. Most of their guys suck, and there's no reason for them to play like a tight rotation necessarily. So that's my only point. Like I think that Herter and Bembry are clearly the top guys that we would expect. But if you're running 150 lineups, just sprinkle in some exposure to the guys from Atlanta. They're going to be completely unowned. It makes a lot of sense because I think it's actually a pretty unpredictable spot.
Fair enough. Anything else from this game that we haven't talked about? There are a ton of moving parts.
Yeah, just a ton of moving parts because even on the Charlotte side, that rotation has just been so weird lately. So it's tough to really nail much down with certainty outside of what we've already talked about.
All right, let's talk about Dallas and Washington. We've got all three games outside of this one should be pretty competitive. Washington's a 1.5 point road favorite. They've been wretched this season. We've got a 227 total. You've got John Wall, who's crossed the 10K threshold on FanDuel. He's 8,800 on DraftKings. And then you've got Bradley Beal, who is 88 on FanDuel. But then you come over to DraftKings and he's 7,400. Pretty nice spot here for Bradley Beal against an underwhelming Dallas team. Look, I have some respect for Wesley Matthews. It's not that I think he's a terrible defender, but I'm not particularly worried about him. Or even Harrison Barnes here. I think only because Beal is cheap enough to where just the minutes and usage should be able to mitigate most of that at 7,400.
Yeah, I think Beal is one of the most clear guys that's really site dependent today. It's going to be tough to prioritize him as the most expensive shooting guard on FanDuel, but on DraftKings at 7,400, like you said, it's just a really, really nice price point. I love the Washington starters in general because they just started off so bad this season that we're already seeing Scott Brooks basically run these guys into the ground, playing huge minutes. The blowout against Oklahoma City, the starters were well on their way to a bunch of minutes. Against the Knicks, John Wall played about 37, 38 minutes. Bradley Beal almost hit 40. So I really like the Washington starters here. And at 7,400, Beal's easily going to be a core play for me on DraftKings. He's got 27.5% usage rate. He's picking up enough assists to where he's not a completely scoring dependent player anymore like we used to see in his career. And the price tag and the minutes are there. So on DraftKings in particular, I love Beal.
I'm with you. By the way, M Hacker one says every question Dave asked, Adam answered 2 minutes prior while giving his take. I'm convinced Dave doesn't listen while Adam speaks.
You and me both.
I'm looking at the chat. I'm trying to make sure everything's under control here. Leave me alone, man. What are your thoughts on Bradley Beal? Let's keep going though. We're both there on Beal. I mean, it makes too much sense. And truthfully, starting last season, we both talked about this quite a bit last year. Last year was the first year where Bradley Beal was kind of like, all right, John Wall doesn't need to be the guy with everything. Brad Beal actually was assisting more. He began just doing a little bit more of everything, which really helped his ceiling and his floor. He's got another 27% usage rate this season. I like what we're seeing from him, and I think that's a really fair price point. Outside of him, though, I need to know, what are we doing? And Otto Porter is playing, by the way, with that toe injury. What are we doing with John Wall, who is 88 on DraftKings and 10-4, the most expensive point guard on FanDuel at 10,400?
I'm playing a lot of Don Wall just because of the minutes and with it being a shorter slate.
Where? On FanDuel?
Everywhere.
Okay.
Just with it being a shorter slate, I'm not as concerned about what you and I talk about a lot with, John Wall kind of being overpriced for his ceiling, but priced correctly or a little bit low for his floor. I'll take the points. Just, on the shorter slate, it's hard to find those, especially on a slate like this where there's just not a lot to like. And just the minutes that he's playing. I mean, we don't really have a sample size yet to see how much Dwight Howard's going to impact him. But I just don't think that it's going to be enough to where I don't want to roster him, if we're going to get 38 to 40 minutes in a competitive game. Obviously, it's easier to get to him on DraftKings at 8,800 than it is on FanDuel. But even in my initial FanDuel crunch, I'm getting, plenty of John Wall in there. So I really like Wall here.
Are you capping him?
Yeah, I have. I'm trying to get it to pop up now, but it won't. I had Kemba in my initial crunch. I had Kemba capped at 50%. I had Wall capped at 40, and Wall hit the 40.
Okay. That's
Um,
pretty interesting. 8,800 though. You know what? Actually, let me pose this question this way. We'll get to the Portland game shortly, but we know that both Portland and Milwaukee have really quality defenses. I mean, anything can happen. Dame is, matchup agnostic. Oftentimes you can just put him in there and hope that he explodes. But Wall and Lillard are pretty similar players, not in the way they produce, but the final outcome, right? Like once in a while they give you that 60-point game. Dame had 2 in a row, but then they kind of go back to the, high 30s, mid 40s, maybe a 50 thrown in there, right? Very, very similar in terms of output. Lillard's $800 more than Wall on DraftKings today. Does that take away your interest from Lillard for the most part?
Even on FanDuel, I'm getting a lot more Wall than Lillard. Lillard's
Wow.
actually,
Okay.
yeah, Lillard's actually someone that I'm trying to kind of force into my lineups a little bit, just because I don't like the idea of going into tournaments tonight with like no Damian Lillard. But yeah, I have Wall projected for more points than Lillard, just because I haven't projected to play 4 to 6 minutes more.
Right.
And
So even a more expensive John Wall is popping up more in optimals, is what you're saying. Simple as that.
yeah, I haven't projected for a couple more points than Dame Lillard.
All right. Fair enough. I have them like basically neck and neck, and it's a little bit concerning to me because while both of them normally are guys that won't kill you when you fade them, it could be a big difference maker on a 4-game slate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I am manually bumping Lillard a little bit, just because like having 40% Wall and 0% Lillard or something like that is a pretty risky spot to put yourself in on this slate. So I'm going to make sure that I have, some Lillard, not as much as Wall, but just, from running projections, I'm getting more Wall than Lillard.
All right. What else on this Washington team, if any? I do need to talk a little bit here about old Dwight Howard. We both noticed in the first game that was a blowout, just a pathetic home performance against the Thunder. He played 23 minutes and was on pace to play well over 30 had that game not blown out and had no need for him. And then in the second game, of which they won by 13 points at home against the Knicks, Howard plays 31 minutes. We talk about it a lot, how Scott Brooks is more than willing to just run his veteran centers into the ground until their legs fall off. Well, it seems like that's the case with Howard. There doesn't seem to be any limit here, and he's going up against the hulking DeAndre Jordan. What are your thoughts on a $6,100 Dwight on DraftKings? 68 on FanDuel, by the way.
Yeah, he's my favorite center on the board.
It's tough not to like him at that price.
Yeah, the price tag's just too cheap. And both of these games, he's played less minutes than I think he was actually intended to. You mentioned the blowout against Oklahoma City, where he played about 23 and a half minutes in 3 quarters. And people, I think, looked at that and they were like, oh, yeah, there was like confirmation bias there where people were like, oh, yeah, his first game back from injury, I was expecting about 24 minutes. He was limited to 24. No, he wasn't. The game blew out. He was going to play a ton of minutes there. The game against the Knicks, he lost 4.5 minutes at the end of the second quarter to foul trouble. Then he lost a minute and a half at the end of the game because Washington was up by 13 and pulled their starters. So if you add those minutes on, you're looking at 36 minutes from Howard. Even if you project him at like 34, he's just too cheap for the price tag. He hasn't been great in his first 2 games with Washington, and maybe he won't be as productive as he was last year, but I would still think that he ends up closer to the 1.2 points per minute that he put up with Charlotte than the 1 fantasy point per minute he's gotten so far with Washington. And the price tag is just way too cheap, I think, for, the production he can give you in the minutes he's playing. And if you go back and look at, games against DeAndre Jordan, just because it can be a tough matchup for guys that rely on rebounding and putbacks like Dwight does. In his last 4 been pretty decent against Jordan. Nothing great, but has easily been paying off his price tag. Double-digit rebounds in 3 or 4 of those games, 15 in one, 16 in another. So I just think the price tag's too cheap for him.
The funny thing about Dwight at this stage of his career is like him and Jordan are kind of similar players now because you're not really drawing up plays for Dwight anymore, right? Like, I mean, he's going to get more opportunities to score than Jordan is, but it's the rebound block game that matters most. And Dwight is going to shoot more than Jordan. There's no question. But what I'm saying is it's not like, all right, let's focus the offense around Dwight. Wall and Beal are secondary. It's just never going to be the case anymore. However, you're talking about a player that last year averaged, as you said, 1.25 fantasy points per minute. And then the year before, 1.17. Like he's averaged north of a fantasy point per minute every year but his rookie season where he averaged right under it. and well over a fantasy point per minute in almost every one of his last like 8, 9, 10 seasons. I get it. He's getting old. But everything you just said, and then you factor in the price point, it's really not unrealistic to say, all right, if Dwight plays 32 minutes today, how much do I really need him to produce in order to give me what I need? If he does come out of this game with like 1.25 fantasy points per minute, you're talking about a 40 fantasy point game from Dwight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of that's the spot. That's why the spot's so appealing to me. It's not that I love the matchup against DeAndre or anything. It's just that it's right. Yeah. If he plays the minutes that I expect him to play in a competitive game, it's just so hard for him to actually have a bad game at his price. And he clearly, can go out and have a big game.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing too, you look at Dwight as a tough matchup, or I'm sorry, Jordan as a tough matchup, and there's no doubt that it is, but it's also a matchup where it's not a dominant offensive player, so you're not as worried about foul trouble. Now, Dwight can find ways to get into foul trouble, unique ways, right? Remember last year he had that game where he had like 8 turnovers and then didn't play in the second half and like 5 offensive fouls. I know you remember that because he was pretty popular that day.
Yeah, vaguely.
Vaguely. Oh, I remember it vividly. He had 7 or 8 turnovers in the first half. It was brutal. But yeah, look at these games and look at the rotations and tell me that they don't set up for Dwight to see, potentially 34 minutes. Now, I will say last game he came in and he closed out the game, right? Yeah, maybe he didn't.
He left a minute and a half before the game ended.
Right, a minute and a half. So he played how many total minutes? 31 and a half or something. Yeah. You're talking about, I mean, that's all we need to talk about. He could play 33 minutes in a close game, and this is expected to be.
So trouble in that game.
Oh, right. Yep. It's not a matchup thing. It's a minute and price tag thing. And I think on a 4-game slate, it makes plenty of sense. Anything else for Washington?
Yeah, I like Markieff Morris as well. He's really, especially on FanDuel, he's 5,300 at that terrible power forward position. On DraftKings, he's eligible at both forward positions. I don't think he plays as many minutes as Wall, Beal, or Howard, but I do like the fact that Scott Brooks in that game against the Knicks was staggering him and Dwight Howard. So when Howard came out, you had Markieff Morris at the 5, which is really, really important for him. He's more productive when he gets those minutes, but also it gave him an opportunity to play without any of Howard, Beal, or Wall on the floor, which makes him more of a focal point of the offense going against, it'll be against this second unit for Dallas. So I think that Markieff Morris is another really good play. I think he'll probably be my highest or second highest owned guy on FanDuel.
Yeah, I like Morris too. We talked about him earlier today. I don't think he's a bad play at all. Look, if this game stays competitive, you might have a situation where several guys from each side are in, winning tournament lineups. Now, you could say the same thing about Phoenix and Brooklyn too, Adam, and that's what makes this game kind of interesting, or this slate kind of interesting. There's a myriad ways you can go here. And I think Washington has several quality options. We've already discussed 4 of them. How about this? In terms of priority, give me your Washington Wizard players in terms of priority, just to make it easier for the viewers.
Sure. Dwight Howard is number 1. Keith, so I guess Keith on FanDuel is number 1. But excluding that, Dwight Howard, Beal on DraftKings, and then Wall. Porter's last out of the starters for me. Other than that, I'll probably hit my ownership caps on every starter on the Wizards.
All right, beautiful. Other side of this one, Doncic is playing. We know that. Well, he's probable at least. By the way, Kevin Huerter is starting in place of Taurean Prince. Just circling back real quick. I think you can get pretty decent minutes from him here. Pretty good minutes.
I had him at about 25. I think that 25 to 28 probably is where he ends up.
Yeah, and I'd put Bembry around 29, 30. If Prince doesn't jack shit up.
Carter?
I'm sorry. If Vince Carter doesn't. Yeah, sorry. Misspoke there. So Yo Daddy now is worried about Dwight Howard. So Howard doesn't worry you at all. Dwight, isn't he going to struggle against DeAndre? Look, it's a minutes and price thing. If you really don't like the matchup, I'd recommend just looking elsewhere because center has plenty of options. If it's really worrying you, then I would just say, go somewhere else because it's just a point per dollar thing, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, it's price is all that matters in DFS. Like there would be a price. I don't care who Dwight Howard's facing. There would be a price where he becomes a good play. For me, $6,100 against DeAndre Jordan is certainly that price.
On a 4-game slate.
Yeah.
Dallas, talk to me about this Maverick. I'm all over the place. This Mavericks team.
Yeah, I like this one too. I love this game in general, but you have Luka Doncic who is going to play. He's got the highest average on the team at 34.8 minutes per game. He has the second highest usage rate amongst the starters. He has the highest expected assist percentage. He has the second highest rebounding percentage behind DeAndre Jordan. So he's doing everything on the floor. It's a pace up game for Dallas. And they're facing, a Washington team that's just been atrocious defensively this season. So I love Luka Doncic. It's really annoying that he's still only a point guard on DraftKings, especially on this slate where that's where so many good options are. But it's going to be easier to get there on FanDuel at 8,100. That's one reason why I find myself with much less Bradley Beal on FanDuel is he's $700 more than Luka Doncic at the same position. So I like him a lot. You have a nice price on Dennis Smith. Harrison Barnes and Wes Matthews both are at nice prices as well. Not guys I'm prioritizing, but I like it. I like the spot for them. DeAndre Jordan is the one that I'm having trouble with because I love the spot. It's just that he's so much more expensive on both sites than Dwight Howard, than Yusuf Nurkic, and even DeAndre Ayton is in the same price range or cheaper depending on the site. So it's been tough for me to get to Jordan without forcing him in. But I think that it's a good matchup, and if you can get there, I certainly wouldn't have a problem with it. I did see someone mention in the chat on Awesemo, and I agree with them completely. Dwight Howard, especially on FanDuel, where he's a $3,900 power forward and you can drop him if he sucks, I think is a really interesting play because you can only project him to play, 13 or 14 minutes, whatever center minutes DeAndre Jordan isn't playing. But those minutes are going to be against, the Washington second unit that is not going to be able to rebound at all. It's just the kind of spot where you could see Dwight Powell be so productive in his time on the floor. And then you get, kind of increased outs, for a lack of a better way to put it. If Jordan gets into foul trouble or if the game blows out or something weird happens where he could just, absolutely smash. So I think that where you can drop his price, Dwight Powell's a really, really good play at that terrible power forward position.
Yeah, horrible power forward position. Totally agree. Powell's also a guy, that will give you decent per minute production. So yeah, I think you're right. Powell, I'll tell you this much. Powell would have been even more interesting if Dwight wasn't back yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll see much time against Dwight anyway. I think it'll be against Keith and Jeff Green. But
of course, I'm saying if right, that's what I'm saying. If Dwight wasn't back, there's a definite possibility that that Carlisle, not that he would want to, but could go small in a spot like this.
Right. Yeah, I'm following.
You know what I mean? We saw so many coaches do that before Howard returned from that injury, where they would just go small because you got guys like Keith and Jason Smith out there.
Yeah, I'm following.
What else do you have on this one before we move on?
I think that's about it. Basically every player on both teams.
It really does feel that way. I don't like being those guys at all.
No, this is my favorite game on the slate for fantasy purposes.
Right. You know what would be cool though if Doncic and Dennis Smith Jr. won't both only point guard on FanDuel or DraftKings. That would be kind of neat.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, Phoenix and Brooklyn. Brooklyn 2-point favorites here on the road. 221 total, another pretty high one, up above 220. And this is a Brooklyn team that just shot the Sixers off the court, grabbed a ton of turnovers or forced a ton of turnovers. Shot a ton of threes and just went on a spree. There are some decent players on this team. Jarrett Allen has really looked productive. I mean, I like what I'm seeing from Jarrett Allen defensively and even offensively. He's getting a little bit involved. Karis LeVert, Tim Hardaway light. I mean, I won't even say light at this point. Outside of playing less minutes, they're really, really similar players. But his price is up over $7K, Adam. We'll start with the Brooklyn side here. We'll start in the backcourt, actually. If D'Angelo Russell was getting 30 minutes per game, I'd be locking him in everywhere. But I mean, this dude, you can't rely on him to play 27 minutes some games.
Yeah, it's Brooklyn in general has kind of been a mess. We have Kenny Atkinson back to doing the same stuff he did last year that made it an absolute nightmare whenever this team
We
played.
love Spencer Dinwiddie. I mean, come
Yeah.
on, dude.
Yeah, I mean Dinwiddie playing a ton at the 2. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's been annoying. I wish they would just take Napier out of the rotation, give more minutes to Russell, and then everybody's happy. But yeah, I mean Russell, he hadn't played the fourth quarter in I think 2 games, and then he got in last game in the fourth, but the game was a blowout, so he still lost 3 minutes, only ended up playing 25. I have him projected for around 28 minutes here. Wouldn't be shocking, I guess, if he gets 30, but the price tag's just really mediocre on this slate, especially where he's a point guard because the position is so good. So, secondary play there. I do like Karis LeVert. It's just hard to prioritize him at that price tag. I think it makes it a good tournament play just because people probably won't really do it. But his usage rate is right alongside D'Angelo Russell. His expected assist percentage is at 21.5%, which is nice. He does a good job of picking up defensive stats, and this is a game where I would expect him to be able to do that. So I like LeVert. I can't prioritize him over guys like Beal or Booker or Doncic, but I like him. Jared Allen's price is nice. If Dwight Howard weren't so cheap, I would probably have a lot of Jared Allen. But because he is so cheap, I'm finding the money for Dwight in a lot of lineups. And then Hollis Jefferson, I think, is a good play on FanDuel, just out of like because there's nothing else. But I would caution against looking too much into the last game where he played a ton of minutes because Jared Dudley picked up, I think it was 3 fouls in the first 2 minutes of the second half and subbed out. So Hollis Jefferson picked up a bunch of minutes there. He got some minutes at the 5 as well. It was good to see him play close to 30 minutes. But in terms of projecting minutes for this game and what they plan on doing, I'm still not confident giving that to him. So I think he's fine. It's just probably not as excited on him as we haven't projected, I think, to be the second highest owned power forward on FanDuel. I'm not that high on him.
Yeah. I guess the problem is in terms of highest owned guys on FanDuel, it gets kind of messy at the power forward position. And I will say, though, I think if you're talking about him being the second highest owned guy there, is it possible that he pays that price tag off and because the position is so shallow that it ends up working out? Absolutely. But that's not to say that he's Mr. Consistency, right? Especially with Atkinson at the helm.
Yeah, my point was just more that with him coming in at really high ownership, I'm not saying even that I disagree with it because there's so few options there, but I prefer Markieff to Hollis Jefferson. And
by the way, we're showing Hollis Jefferson as the highest owned player on FanDuel right now. If you refresh the projections.
Yeah, I hadn't done that. Yeah.
We have 47% along with DeAndre Bembry. So 47% at 5,300.
So yeah, I mean, I think he's a perfectly fine play, especially on FanDuel. But it's just that I like Keefe a lot more at the same price. And on DraftKings, it gets really tough to prioritize Hollis Jefferson just because you do have more options.
Agreed. Yeah, Markieff Morris at the same price. To me, that just makes a lot of sense.
He's going to play, barring foul trouble and injury, he's going to play more minutes. Yep. He's going to play more minutes at center. To me, there's just no way that you get to Rondae Hollis Jefferson over Markieff Morris in terms of projections for this game.
Now, the projected disparity or differential between Markieff Morris and Hollis Jefferson on DraftKings or on FanDuel is very significant. I don't think it'll be that significant. I don't think it's going to be a 33% difference, but I do think you're going to see Hollis Jefferson a lot higher owned. And when I look at Keefe, I mean, not to go back to this game, but we'll just do it quickly. Because we're making a comparison here with Markieff Morris, you just said it. More minutes. It's not like he doesn't have a ceiling. He does have a ceiling. Dwight being back doesn't help, but there's opportunity for Markieff Morris to put up really solid numbers here. And without foul trouble, kind of just reiterating what you said. Without foul trouble, you're getting 30 plus minutes. I like that. So I think that's a really valid point, especially given the projected ownership. On the Phoenix side of the ball, we had a comment in the YouTube chat. Let me find it. Grain Grippa Candy Paint Drippa says, and that is his name. Jordan is the ceiling play. I'm going to push back on that. I think Jordan is your safe play, but I don't think Jordan is you're talking about DeAndre Jordan. I don't think Jordan is necessarily a ceiling play because he's not someone that scores a lot of points. He will give you the rebounds. He's a decent shot blocker. He's not an elite shot blocker. He'll get you maybe a couple assists, but yeah, I don't think the ceiling play comes from DeAndre Jordan. I think that's where the safe play comes.
To me, I'm not even going to question his ceiling, but I will say that I think Howard, Nurkic, and DeAndre Ayton all have the same, just as much upside, just the same ceiling, and they're all cheaper.
I think Ayton has more because we haven't
Ayton,
seen it
Ayton
yet. We haven't seen it yet. Okay, we haven't seen him erupt yet. But like, if you know anything about Ayton, he's a really good passer. Like, just court IQ and vision is through the roof. He's a really good rebounder. He can block shots. He can rack up steals because he's super athletic. Like, this season, and I'm assuming before November is up, we're going to see a 60 fantasy point game from DeAndre Ayton because he's just too talented not to have one of those games across 35 minutes, Adam.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. So I worded that poorly. Like, Ayton, I think, has a higher ceiling, but I think that just talking in generalities, like, Jordan does have a high ceiling. So does Dwight Howard. So does Yusuf Nurkic. So does DeAndre Ayton, and they're all cheaper.
Right. This isn't hating on DeAndre Jordan. What I'm saying is that a lot of these, that Ayton and even Howard, given his price point, Howard can score points too. Like, these guys have ceilings.
Right. So like to use yesterday's slate as an example to compare it with, you had Bam Adebayo, who clearly was the best point per dollar play, but then you had Andre Drummond, who a decent amount of the time is going to score 30 raw points more than Bam Adebayo. So there was merit to paying all the way up for Drummond just for the raw point differential. In terms of raw point ceilings, I don't think Jordan's is really any higher than Ayton or Nurkic or Howard. So it becomes harder for me to make that argument and to force him in.
Agreed. Bill Butlicker says these two new hosts think I'm a troll, but I love them. Thanks, Bill. No, I make no assumptions. And just another point, Sean says Ayton is just so chalky tonight. Look, I'm not disputing ownership, but that's hardly anything I'd like to argue with you because he's going to be popular. But I don't know. Do you think he's going to be that much higher owned than DeAndre Jordan?
I'm not sure. I mean, I assume Dwight ends up being the highest owned out of this group. He was 25.
I don't know.
He was 25.
I don't know.
Last slate. I assume people going there.
Yeah. I don't know. Just for the reaction, in chat and stuff, it seems like there is some pushback.
I've got pushback today on Dwight too, so I don't know, maybe.
Anyway, I don't disagree with Sean that he's going to be chalky. Like, Ayton is definitely someone you can fade. Pretty much anyone on this slate you can fade, but the point was simply that you have a high ceiling with Ayton, even if he hasn't gone plus 47 yet. Like, there's no doubt this dude can do it. I really like him. I've said a lot. I'm impressed with Jared Allen's defense, but Ayton is he's a matchup proof big because of everything he does. And I expect him to continue getting minutes in the fourth quarter, even if a game gets out of hand. I don't think you're going to see Rashawn Holmes really take much away from him, even though Josh raised some valid points earlier today. I don't see that being the case. They could throw anyone at the 5. It doesn't matter if you're in a blowout, but they've decided to go with Ayton. So I think there's just, I like him quite a bit in a game that should be close for Phoenix, and you don't get many of them, Adam. Talk to me about the rest of this team, because you've got Devin Booker, who is, in my opinion, very affordably priced. You have Isaiah Cannon, who is cheap. Talk to me about all of these guys, and don't forget about all Trevor Ariza either.
Yeah, outside of Ayton, Ariza, I think, is probably my favorite guy from Phoenix when you factor in price and everything, because he's still playing 34 to 36 minutes a night. He's not as scoring dependent as he was with the Rockets. He has an expected assist percentage up around 16.5%, 17% this season, and that's really nice because it used to be, when he was playing with Chris Paul and James Harden, that if he's not knocking down his three-pointers, you're not getting anything from Trevor Ariza. But that hasn't been the case this season. So I think at really weak forward positions, he makes a lot of sense for me. And then Devin Booker, obviously, is the best player on the team. He's still dealing with soreness from his injury, which is a little bit concerning, but I'm not, too worried about it. I think that he's a really, really good FanDuel play. $8,100 there. He's actually cheaper than he is on DraftKings. On DraftKings, I still like him. It's just a little bit harder to get there because he's $800 more than Bradley Beal is at shooting guard.
Yeah. the price difference definitely comes into play. But you said you mentioned you like the Washington Dallas game a lot. So do I, but I like this game a lot too. I really like. Yo Daddy Now says, "Come on, dude, just say 60 plus game for Ayton tonight." Screw it. Ayton's going for 60. There you go. You happy? Uh, I think Phoenix has a bunch of different ways they can produce. I was hoping Warren would have been out, but he's not. I think Ariza still gets his minutes. I don't hate Ariza here, right? He's not a productive player, but if you're giving me a guy that in competitive games is playing, 35 plus, I'm not hating on him at sub 5K, Adam. That's kind of where I'm at on Ariza. I think you could do a whole lot worse at his price point.
Oh, I completely agree. And the position's just so bad too.
All right, let's keep it going. We got one more game. And what is it? We got a 7 p.m. lock, of course. And it's Chris and Eddie coming up next. You got live before lock, going to bring you up to 7 p.m. Eastern time. Portland and Milwaukee at 2-point spread. Milwaukee favored on the road, 230 total. Some really good players in this game, but it is at least worth pointing out that on the year, Milwaukee's allowing the lowest field goal percentage to their opponents. You watch them play, you'll understand why. Portland, the third lowest. Both of these teams play very solid defense. 3-point percentage. The Bucks are allowing the third lowest. Portland is allowing the 8th lowest percentage. Now, Milwaukee's allowing a ton of 3-point attempts. They just aren't allowing any efficiency on it. So curious to know. Start wherever you'd like here. Also, the Bucks are allowing the most field goal attempts total to their opponents this year, which I find kind of interesting. We can talk about that, but I'm curious, where are you at? Obviously, we have to start. Well, they are playing also at the 4th fastest pace, but where are you at on Giannis here? He's not cheap. He's coming in at 12.6 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel at small forward 12.8. So you're not getting a discount.
Yeah, I said it on the podcast last night, and it was my game plan going in today was that I would just really let projections do what, figure out how much Giannis I was going to play, because I think the price tag finally has caught up to where he is or where he should be. But as I think probably everyone knows by now, he's my favorite DFS player for everything that he can do. So it's not a great matchup against Portland. He is expensive. He's still hitting my ownership caps on both sites. And so I'm still going to end up playing a ton of Giannis. Obviously he gives you the most raw point upside on this slate by a pretty wide margin. It's not a great spot, but he just does so much stuff in terms of, usage, in terms of rebounding, in terms of assists, and then the defensive stats that he adds on as well. Also plays big minutes, second highest total game on the slate, only a 2-point spread. There's still a lot to like here, and he's just matchup proof enough. I'm still playing a ton of Giannis.
How much is a ton?
Right now I have all my people capped at 60% because I haven't edited it yet, and he's hitting 60.
Wow. Okay. Wow. How about that? That is something else, man. That is a lot of Giannis at that price. You feel good with the lineups that you're building around him?
Yeah, they seem, pretty decent. Again, I've only really looked at FanDuel, and you can drop the cheap guys there, so it's easier. But, I just think that Giannis gives you such a high floor. DraftKings, I could see maybe ending up with a little bit less, just because I want to work in more of, the mid-range guys like Beal and Wall and Booker and everyone. But on FanDuel, for sure, I think I'll end up with a ton of Giannis.
Now, do you have any interest elsewhere on the Bucks side of the ball, whether it be Middleton, who on FanDuel is very affordably priced? Do you have any interest in anyone else here? You can include the center position.
Yeah, I think Bledsoe is too cheap, at least on DraftKings at 6,300. Even on FanDuel at 71, I'm getting plenty, but 6,300 I think is just really, really cheap. But overall, it's kind of secondary plays for me because Giannis is the guy that I really want to target here, and it is a good Portland defense, so it's not like I want to grab as many bucks against them as I can.
My thing on the other side, when you look at Nurkic, this could be a spot where he dominates Brook Lopez, or it could be a spot where Lopez attempts 9 or 10 3-pointers and just shoots him off the court. Nurkic, unlike a lot of dominant bigs that are always going to get their minutes, is somebody that Terry Stotts is not afraid to put on a short leash in a game like this. What do you think of Nurkic here?
I like him. I am concerned for the same reasons that you said. I think it is worth pointing out that Nurkic has faced Brook Lopez 3 times since joining Portland. He's played 29, 29, and 30 minutes. Obviously, Lopez was on different teams then, 2 with the Lakers, 1 with Brooklyn. But it was still Terry Stotts, and Terry Stotts has always been hesitant to put Nurkic on the floor against guys that'll drag him out. So he did only have 5 rebounds and 6 rebounds in the first 2 of those games. Got double-digit rebounds in the final game last season. So the fact that Lopez pulls him away from the basket is a little bit concerning. But on the other hand, he should be able to grab a bunch of rebounds when he is near the basket, and he should be able to score basically at will. And his price tag's still really cheap. So Nurkic is still a really good tournament play for me. I'll probably end up with more Dwight Howard than him, but I don't think there's any way to argue the ceiling that he has in the spot.
I got to be honest. I'm surprised you got 60% Giannis here, but you kind of are the Giannis whisperer, so I'll rock with you. I feel like even on this slate, there's so many nice balanced lineups you can make. Like I love some of these mid-range guys.
I'm sure it's because I haven't projected for 65 points.
That could have something to do with it, sure. Yeah, let's talk about the backcourt. We talked about Dame a little bit, and you mentioned that you weren't getting much, but you're going to try and get a little bit in just because you don't want Dame to be the guy that burns you, but you do have more John Wall. I'm accurate there, right?
Yep.
Okay. What about McCollum? Are we still saying he's too cheap at this price point?
It's good in good matchups, yeah. But on this slate, in this matchup, it's not someone I'm prioritizing. Whatever I end up with, is fine. But I just shooting guards deep enough where I don't see the need to, force in CJ McCollum against the Bucks.
Yeah, I see the same. Anything else from this game? Aminu, anyone else you're interested in?
Aminu's fine on FanDuel, especially. He's in that same price range with Hollis Jefferson and with Morris.
I don't think Collins is a crazy play if you think Nurkic could get played off the court. I mean, it's totally like a desperation punt where you're looking for super low ownership, but Collins could be a guy to benefit from that.
Yeah, I was also going to say that Portland's front court rotation has been a bit weird the last couple of games. You've had Myers Leonard in there more. You've had less Caleb Swanigan, but you've also there was a brief stretch where Zach Collins actually has played the 4. It was due to foul trouble mostly, but just the fact that it happened. And it was also against Minnesota, which is a much different animal than Milwaukee is. But just the fact that it happened, if you're on a 4-game slate looking for reasons to play a cheap Zach Collins, maybe Stotts is kind of moving towards trying to get him more minutes without sacrificing Nurkic.
All right, let's do our top positions again. If you're just tuning in now, Herter is just starting for Atlanta over the injured Taurean Prince. Really, nothing else there. Otto Porter is going to play for Washington. So that's about the news we have. If anything else breaks, Chris and Eddie will be monitoring that as we lead up to lock. You'll want to stick around for that. Also hit us with a thumbs up on your way out. We appreciate all of you guys. Top positions, point guard, go.
Kemba, Wall, Doncic.
Yeah, the same. Actually, I like Trae Young more than you do, though. I think Trae Young's a pretty interesting play, and I like him quite a bit, just based on the usage he should see. Shooting guard, Beal. Now, some of these are site dependent. Beal, I like Booker on both sites, but more on FanDuel, obviously. And then I'll throw Kevin Huerter in there. He's 3,300. He's real cheap.
Yeah, same group for me. I'll also throw in Bazemore.
All right, what do you got at small forward?
Giannis, Ariza, Bembry.
All right. I got to throw Giannis in. I don't know how much I'm going to end up with, but just because he's easily the best player on this slate, maybe in the world, who knows? Levert, Bembry, and I was going to use Bazemore here. I'm okay with that. At power forward, it's tough. You got Hollis Jefferson on FanDuel, but I also totally agree with your Morris take, where he's the exact same price. And then aside from that, it's not pretty on DraftKings either. I mean, you have a little bit more wiggle room. You could play Giannis here if you want, but it's still pretty ugly, which is why I have a little bit of interest in Trevor Ariza at 4,900.
Yeah, Markieff Morris, my favorite guy here. I like Amari Spellman as a value guy. And then on FanDuel, if you need to go to others, Hollis Jefferson and Marvin Williams.
All right, center.
Howard, Ayton, Nurkic.
All right, Howard, Ayton, and Jordan. And that'll do it for us. Hit us up on Twitter at Lafay_D at ShipMyMoneyDFS. Hopefully Modem will be here soon. And find us in Slack chat if you're not a member of awesomemo.com yet. Go over there, check it out, AWESEMO.com. Join the family, man. We have a blast each and every day, and you can 24/7 talk sports in the Slack chat whenever you want. So good luck. Thanks for viewing, and we'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive.